Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel and video game news. Today is Friday, March 18th. Let's hope everything seems like it's gonna work here. It's entry time for the normal and rare festival. Okay. The Wow, I am starting off slow today. I kind of just woke up. And this threw me off my start. Yeah, today's gonna be weird, I guess. Alrighty. I don't know if I logged in yesterday either. And it really is a nightmare just trying to log in and get that as part of your daily schedule to log in. Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Because of the whole pandemic / Ukrainian stuff happening, my internet I think has been affected some on occasion, made worse. I think we're gonna start seeing that in general as a thing, is that people's internet services are going to start to suffer. Why is this taking, this has never taken any time. But I did definitely switch over my DNS crypt server from one service to another on my router, because it seemed like I was having a bit of trouble, and it's a shame that it can't just cycle through several different services or use a couple services, or at least have one backup. Inherently, it was a very good, smart idea that when standards were made, there was always a DNS server and then a backup DNS server. As far as just internet protocol, but it's kind of weird that you don't have a gateway and a backup gateway, or other settings that are backup. So there's even inconsistency certainly with that. Still, the average person, if you don't know what I'm talking about, let's try that again. The average person basically does have a gateway and a backup gateway in a cell phone, because you usually have your Wi-Fi, and if your Wi-Fi is not working, you turn off the Wi-Fi, or it will just switch over automatically, possibly, to the cell phone signal data servers. Yeah, this is weird. Let's hop into a game. So, as far as this festival, let's start with a loner deck and just start with this. So these are all going to be normal or rare cards, which I think is going to fairly limit you down to some fairly basic gameplay. When you're looking here and you're seeing 3 uses of Mystical Space Typhoon and 2 uses of Ring of Destruction, that does seem like that's fairly basic. There are some ritual cards and XYZ cards and synchro cards, or I guess these blue ones are link cards. So if you can really use these extra decks, then there might be something to this. But apparently we're not quite at that point. 323 is when it starts. So I have to say, Konami has learned its lesson quite a bit here. Instead of just springing a festival on people, and it being an over the weekend event. They've now given us a massive 5 days to notice that this event is happening, plenty of time to build your own custom deck, and have a lot more variety there. So let's look at the reward list. That was the other problem, certainly, is that there was kind of a ridiculous amount of score that you had to get. And the scale and the rewards kind of dropped off. So 50 gets you 50, another 50 gets you 50, and then a massive jump of 400 getting you, well, 50 got you 50 before, then 400 should get you 400, but instead it's getting you 200. Then a jump again for 500 to get you 200, then another 500 to get you 200, then another 500 to only get you 100, then another 500 to only get you 50, and another 500 to only get you 50. But once you get to 3,500, you get another 200. So that's probably their target. Notice that they're not really giving you anything other than gems also, because after that 500 gives you 50, 500 gives you 50, and then if you get to 5,000 you get 300. The scoring here feels very much all over the place. Then another 500 gives you 50, another 500 gives you 50, then when you get to 7,000 you get 300, then another 550, another 500 for 50, then you get to 10,000 and you can get 300. And it's only at this very bottom part over 10,000 that you stop getting gems and you start getting legacy pack tickets times 2 for every 1,000. And unless there is some special secret value to legacy pack tickets that I don't understand, 1,000 is quite a lot, or it definitely feels like quite a lot to just get effectively 4 legacy cards, because every legacy pack only gives you 2 cards. Maybe it gives you only 2 cards you don't own. So between the 300 legacy packs I already have and whatever they offered here, there might be a lot of gaps filled in the collection, but that's not great. And it's 1,000 all the way down for these legacy packs. So it definitely feels like, well, Konami has made some major progress in the way it's thinking. It's still kind of lackluster in the variety of rewards it can offer. There's definitely seems like it's just the premium gems currency or the or legacy packs. It doesn't seem like what you would have wanted to ideally have is have a special pack in the shop that was just normals and rares as a bonus pack, which that totally would make sense, that there should be a normal pack, a rare pack, a super rare pack, and an ultra rare pack, and there should be bonus tickets to give you specifically those cards. But no such luck. But I will say they are getting better. Well, it seems like I'm not going to be able to spectate live at all today. Seems like this is broken. We might as well go over the accountability section then. I finished up Lego Worlds. It is by far the worst Lego game that I've ever played from TT Games. Just in the fact that it has no story. There's no major bad guy, like when there really should have been. If they're going to put an adventure mode in it, there should have been an actual adventure there instead of it being a very bad, pointless tutorial thing. It really should have told people to play with mouse and keyboard, because it really is only designed to play with mouse and keyboard in sandbox mode, and it's still not really fun there. The whole dungeon concept falls apart immediately once you realize you can just blow up the walls and the floors and ceilings in dungeons to get wherever you want to go. You don't have to even walk through the traps, and the dungeons are not well designed. They're very repetitive and generic. There's not a consistent interface with the controls and not a consistent game there. And the truth is, real world Lego, or trying to have a virtual experience of building Legos, doesn't work. And it's just been, frankly, a miracle that the licensed and the minifig characters that make things like Lego Star Wars did work. Because effectively Lego Star Wars is not a Lego game. It is a kids video game with minifig Lego characters as the skin. You have a few little gameplay mechanics. I guess we'll just make sure we can duel. If I can't duel today, then we're going to be in a weird position. Well, that worked. There are a few little gameplay mechanics where you run up to a pile of popping Lego studs and hold down the B button and pretend like you're building something out of Lego, but that is as far as it goes, with the exception of maybe Lego Lord of the Rings, which did have a bit of a mini game where you put together chunks of Lego. Putting together Lego in the real world is just a calming, kind of boring activity. It does not translate well to video games, and TT games have just been able to work around that concept very well. But Lego Worlds really is trying to be a Minecraft game without being even as good as Minecraft was at the time. There's definitely an inconsistency with the currency too, because it's this open world game that doesn't render chunks like Minecraft, so your worlds are a set limit. It's programmed the wrong way from the beginning, when it really should have just stolen Minecraft's concepts of new land generation, new chunk generation. But if you play it long enough in adventure mode, you will, once you start doing the dungeons, have just a ridiculous amount of you'll have a ridiculous amount of studs. But then after you've unlocked everything with the studs, there's nothing you can do with them. It's not like you need studs to place down items and buildings and houses that you've discovered. So that stud count would just go up and up and up. And as far as I could tell, there's nothing that you could spend it on. Like, the Winter Wonderland DLC had a Santa sleigh for 100,000 studs. I was struggling for a couple hours to think, how in the world would I ever have 100,000 studs? But as soon as I went through the first dungeon, which it takes forever to get to the dungeon, and that's a problem too. But once I went through the first dungeon, I had well over 100,000 studs, and that was the only thing I was struggling to unlock. So yeah, This puts me in a kind of weird position. Well, lots of things have been conspiring certainly to distract me, but I have the Nintendo Switch game, Link's Awakening. I still have a little bit to play on that. I need to probably schedule videos. I also need to start recording something different because I'm still not 100% certain that there isn't something else wrong with my computer, and I need something to really push the graphics, and it's not like Lego Worlds was the best option to push the graphics and make sure things are working. So a lot of distractions, on top of which playing Nintendo Switch which had me lying in bed instead of sitting up in a chair, managed to hurt my back a lot more than I thought it should have. And so now I've been suffering from a hurt back, which is just more of a delay, certainly, on the finishing of the Lego bookshelves that I've been trying to put together to display my real world Lego. The irony there is I may finish putting together the Lego bookshelves and then at some point decide, hey, let's get rid of some or all of Lego after all of that effort. Yeah, I've lost here. See, is there anything else to talk about? I don't think so, particularly for the accountability section. I basically made one 2-hour episode, and I just need to get back in the groove and find a new groove of making content. I also need to do as much as possible to try and get my videos to succeed. The real world decision would be to split the channels up. The easiest thing would certainly be to just start a new channel specifically for live streaming, but I don't think that really works too. What you notice as far as YouTubers who split the channels up, if for instance G4 TV turning into XPlay and then moving all the other shows into their separate channels, they only do that once they hit what they think is a peak of subscribers and viewers. They don't do that brand new from the beginning. So my measly 500 subscribers, I just expect that if I was to start a new channel, would probably get 100 to 200 subscribers at most. And there's just a lot of management and nonsense that has to happen around that. It is something to consider, though, sadly. I would much prefer moving away from YouTube completely and finding a actual potential competitor to YouTube to jump to than just making a second YouTube channel. Speaking of YouTubers, Mumbo Jumbo just posted that he's taking a month off, which, yeah, okay, that That is, he's been making YouTube videos, Minecraft videos for a long time, and a lot of his videos are kind of formulaic and riding the wave of popularity, so he's almost certainly putting in a lot of effort to maintain and grow his pretty popular channel. And taking a month off will be an interesting experiment to see how much that ruins his channel. It's not really a question if it will ruin his channel, it's how much. This is weird. I wanted to point this out from GameDeveloper.com as an article. The future is now how Ubisoft is co-creating new ways of working. It is a sponsored article from the Vice President of Talent at Ubisoft, the Vice President of Global Talent at Ubisoft. And what's funny about this is, if you've been following anything, it has been a very, very aggressive reporting and anti-Ubisoft reporting from GameDeveloper.com as far as the whole Ubisoft scandal that has been over-reported like crazy, particularly by GameDeveloper.com, more than even the average mainstream video game journal site. So, for them to all of a sudden accept sponsored content from them is weird, to say the least. If you want to put on a bit of a tinfoil hat, you could say it's Ubisoft literally bribing GameDeveloper.com to get a better relationship with them so that they stop posting articles that are negative or that are less than neutral in their ways of reporting, which in my opinion they have been less than neutral in their ways of reporting. But on the other hand, and this is the problem with access journalism in general, this is the core problem with access journalism. It could be not Ubisoft bribing GameDeveloper.com. You could look at it as GameDeveloper.com extorting money from Ubisoft. And at a certain level, both are true. That's the game that gets played with access journalism. So, and that's not to say that journalists shouldn't have sources and they shouldn't have insider tips and they shouldn't have contacts with companies to verify what the company's stance or claim is going to be on something. But there is something, particularly in the video game journalism world, where access is way too much, or access journalism is way too much the mainstream thing. In all fairness, it's probably just as bad, if not worse, in most other kinds of reporting too. That's why you unfortunately get so many small-time YouTubers who are just reporting on somebody else's reports, is because they don't have the access, and then it's leaning heavily on whether they have any insight or way of delivery, but it isn't particularly the greatest of systems, for sure. There was this utopian vision at some point that the internet was going to be a place where any individual could just come out and tell their story and it would reach the masses, but it hasn't worked that way. And there is definitely a danger that is felt if that were the case. Like, if everybody's crazy grandpa who's a flat earther can go on Facebook and claim, here's the evidence of the the Earth being flat, that is that feels dangerous, certainly, that just anybody can claim anything with no evidence. But the truth is, journalists have used the fact that they were journalists as some kind of badge of authority for as long as they've existed. Like, particularly when you get into like giant New York Post type organizations, where like there really isn't that much more that's being verified as far as a journalist. We see this in the video game world plenty of times where plagiarists have been hired, and then they're working for like Kotaku, and because Kotaku is a big name that people recognize, they're given a lot more credibility and less scrutiny. The truth is, everybody being able to post on Twitter or Facebook should all have the exact same amount of scrutiny, and we need to increase the amount of scrutiny on big mainstream journalists instances, and not the other way around. Let's see if we can pull this off. We may be able to. Summon this. Sacrificing this. Draw a card. Might as well protect this guy. Yep, that didn't quite work the way I wanted it to, but that may work fine. But yeah, generally speaking, a sponsored content from GameDeveloper.com is not something anybody should read, but it definitely feels weird after a year. Now, in all fairness, trying to be as objective as possible, it is accurate to say that I haven't heard of any negative press being pushed or pushing of a narrative from Game Developer in the past month or two, at least. So there is a chance that that was just enough for Game Developer to decide to go somewhere else, and Ubisoft to reward them. We also get into the weirdness of journalistic ethics versus corporate ethics, which it's an oxymoron to say there are corporate ethics really at all, but Ubisoft as a soulless greedy corporation, like every soulless greedy corporation, kind of has their desire and their imperative to make their business succeed, whereas journalists' desire should be to portray the truth first and foremost at all costs, above all else, and I don't think that really happens as much as you would think. GameDeveloper.com, despite the fact of having a few articles actually still that are unique to them, is so built around pushing their own narrative that is either opinion based or just often feels inaccurate, and they are so built around promoting their own events and their sister companies' events that it's hard to look at them as a good news source, or an ethical news source. Moving on, Tunic had the surprise launch, according to Video Games Chronicles. Yeah. Again, I said it on Wednesday. If somebody wants to friend me on Steam and gift me Tunic, I would love it. But otherwise, I'm going to wait. And these are... I didn't think we had any duplicates, really, from Video Games Chronicles, but these are some bits of news that we have covered again. We covered on Wednesday. It's not terrible to really cover things a couple times, though. It just wastes a lot of time if you do it too much. So we have WrestleQuest being announced, which, yeah, sounds like an interesting idea. It definitely sounds like something that should have been done about 10 years. Borderlands 3 will get crossplay on the PlayStation after an apparent Sony U-turn. A reason for the change in the policy was not given. What's funny about this is we kind of would need to revisit what the policy is as far as crossplay on all Sony games at this point. What games have it, which games don't. Because it's always been this system where smaller games that can't push back were not being allowed to have crossplay, even when crossplay was first introduced as a concept for Sony PlayStations. And then the big games from places like 2K seem to be able to negotiate crossplay more. And it does definitely feel like there's no set in stone policy for everybody. It seems like everybody has to negotiate for it and spend extra time and probably extra money to make it happen. I wouldn't be surprised if Borderlands 3 in particular needs crossplay on the PlayStation just to try to maintain the levels of people playing Borderlands. Borderlands is in kind of a unique position because whether it's something that's really popular or only moderately popular as far as which Borderlands you're talking about, it's not particularly believable that you would have a lot of people playing Borderlands after the initial six weeks launch window. You'll get people that tend to stick more to the Call of Duties or the Halo style games. They'll swing into Borderlands, some of them will, but then they'll swing back out. So Borderlands in particular as a game, I think, is best when you're playing with other people, friends, if you can. And if the number of people you can play with online gets too low, then the game is going to feel a little dead. I definitely play Borderlands in a different way as a solo playing experience, but that's not really what they wanted. Moving on, Video Games Chronicles says Sniper Elite 5 release date has been announced. Check that out. No, we should say the actual date. May 26, 2022. Yeah, I need to make sure to actually say the facts, even if I'm not particularly interested. Elden Ring players have found a hidden underwear item seemingly cut during development. It's unclear why the item was removed. I can tell you there's been full-on nude mods that have been made already for Elden Ring. The hype around Elden Ring is very high. So, like, the nude mod's not getting reported on by quote-unquote respectable journalism. But yeah, the quick turnaround for nude mods in Elden Ring really highlights the passion there of the player base, because you really only see that for the fairly big big games. Let's see, do we want to do this? I guess we probably do. Activate on this guy for no reason. There is, I think, something, since I don't know anything about the Elden Ring story, there is something weird about the fact that you have this like eye damage on this character, and then there's a blue witch character also that I've seen in trailers that has kind of like cracking eye damage on their other eye. And so I don't know if these two characters are supposed to be somehow connected, or if there's just kind of a weird fetish there for eye damage that that got written into one of the creators. That is definitely a story to potentially investigate, and it almost would break down to just being fan theory, because you probably wouldn't be able to get any actual evidence one way or the other. But the question certainly as to what aspects in Elden Ring of the Elden Ring story or visuals are from George R.R. Martin versus other people would be something to potentially pursue. Of course, you never really know, because even if George R.R. Martin is credited as the writer, who's to say there weren't ghostwriters, subcontractors, people just helping him with concepts or ideas, or that there weren't artists and people animating things that were helping a lot and adding actual aspects. As far as I know, having not watched the Game of Thrones series, other than a couple episodes, and having not read the books, Song of Fire and Ice books, I don't, as far as I know, I've never heard of any specific scene where damaging the eyes were specifically focused on. So if that were something George R.R. Martin was intrigued in, it would have to be a new development. But I'm just so completely ill-informed as far as what does happen in the book. I could be totally wrong about that. There could be an entire chapter of somebody being having an eye gouged out or damaged. And it could be his thing, his fetish for violence there. It is very weird, I will also say, that Elden Ring has this feel of potentially being a lot better of a game later on, once the UI has been improved and the bugs have been worked out, and that a remastered version of it is probably going to be that there's a lot of room for a remastered version to improve upon. I would say my experience with the Dark Souls games definitely had that feel too, but on a certain level, what I would have wanted to see from the Dark Souls games would have been for it to be a breadcrumbed, hold your hand, linear experience for babies, basically, which is not what the main audience has been trained to expect or even really wants. Like, I would most definitely, if I was going to play Elden Ring, consider playing on the easiest difficulty, if there are difficulty settings, or looking at strategy guides, or looking up help things like that. Yep. I also wanted to mention I caught a YouTube video talking about the writer and drawer of Dragon Ball. I think his name is Akira Toriyama. I may have just completely mispronounced or said the wrong name there. Might be Akira Toriyama, but the Dragon Ball creator. And I was watching a video of just what he worked on, and I was kind of shocked to find out that he basically animated if not all, a significant portion of the Dragon Quest animations, cover art for the box art and things like that, things in the manual, which I guess it kind of makes sense if you look at the art in Dragon Quest, that it is in that same style. It may very well be that he is the only one that even draws in that style. Oh, that was stupid. Whatever. Yep, we've lost. So you might as well just activate twice and in the turn. Yep. Let's see. The exact next article from Video Games Chronicles. Elden Ring's new patch lets players record NPCs on the map, which I think is probably helpful. It is a great example of what I was just saying, as far as Elden Ring feels like a game that if there's a final remastered or Game of the Year version of it, it will just be way better than what it is now. 3 more Mega Drive Genesis games have been added to the Switch Online. That's Alien Soldier, Light Cruiser, and Super Fantasy Zone. 3 games I do not recognize at all. Yep. If anything, this highlights my feeling, even when the Genesis was originally coming out, that those third-party titles that Sega put out, or those non-mascot tier 1 games that they were putting out, were incredibly forgettable and just not relevant. In a lot of ways, Nintendo would have failed probably as much as Sega has failed if they hadn't succeeded on a few main characters. And I don't think it's just that Nintendo came out as the first toy that a generation had, the NES being actually a second generation video game console, was because the first generations all kind of failed. But they definitely made a great choice to have the seal of quality and limit the amount of junk. They definitely got very lucky with Mario being a popular character, and Donkey Kong being a somewhat popular character. If anything, maybe Donkey Kong was on equal levels with Mario for a brief time there. Super Mario Bros. Versus Donkey Kong in the arcades. But yeah, they had that mascots. They were able to throw out Metroid and and Samus Aran being yet another game that caught people's attention. But I would say a lot of it had more to do not with mascots, but with just good games. NES football is not talked about much, but NES football, as I remember it when I played it as a kid, is actually a pretty great football game for the time. And there's no Madden license on that, there's no character on it, it's just called NES football. Duck Hunt as a series gave us the Duck Hunt dog, who's kind of a mascot, but we never got another Duck Hunt game. And yet, because of bundling and because it just had that Nintendo name on it, Duck Hunt is way more memorable than, say, Hogan's Alley, which is actually a better Zapper game. They failed kind of miserably with the Rob the Robot, so you have to remember their failures too. So not everything succeeded. There was this whole character named Nestor that I think was in the game. Maybe he was just talked about in Nintendo Power. Nestor, not as a character really mentioned at all in modern time. And definitely the third-party title games on the NES are definitely way more forgettable. So I think that's a lesson Nintendo probably needs to learn even now, is that they should be investing to make more first-party games that feel like Nintendo games, just to build up the feeling that there are good games on the Nintendo Switch. Because if you look at the timeline as far as how long the Switch has been out, there is probably 4 or 5 more Nintendo games should have been out by this point. Clearly, Metroid Prime 4, Metroid Prime 1 through 3 remakes would get you 4 more games at that point. The fact that you have these new Joy-Cons and you don't do anything with them, there's no Punch-Out game, instead Wild Arms came out, is weird. And you can't just say, well, we've got Punch-Out on the Nintendo Online emulation. That there needed to be a new Punch-Out that actually used the Joy-Cons motion controls. There's not been a Donkey Kong game. Well, no, I think there is one Donkey Kong game that came out and it's mostly forgotten about. There's been perhaps a glut of Mario games and Mario spin-off character games, and that's about it. Moving on, I want to rush through the news today. As usual, players are reporting issues with Stranger in Paradise's PC ports. Slowdown, stuttering, and excessive VRAM usage are causing problems for some, which that definitely makes it feel like it's not been optimized. Which that's kind of feels like exactly in line with the way Square Enix seems to fund or focus its developments and its games it's developing on. It's a little weird that they wouldn't optimize a Final Fantasy spin-off game, but for PC I just don't think they care. The Indie Development Fund, Kowloon Knights, signs up 8 new games, according to Video Games Chronicles. Let's see, are they going to name the games? These titles include Kit Fox Games, developer of Boyfriend Dungeon, and Going Under, developer Aggro Crab. The titles are Secret Second Project, Worship, a cultist-themed take on a roguelike genre, Tectonica, a factory building an automation game, an unannounced title, 2 new IPs by Australian AAA developer League of Geeks, Sword of Symphony, a musical adventure RPG, and an unannounced passion project by Dutch studio and Weeble Games. So not a lot of meat on the bone of that news, really. And there is a problem, certainly, with this article that I think must be considered and addressed in that this is an indie development fund funding quote-unquote indie developers. That's an oxymoron. It's just not possible. If a developer was actually indie, then they wouldn't be getting funded by a development fund at all. They would be self-funding their development effectively. Now, maybe there's a small difference of like the indie development fund not really having major requirements as far as, do you actually have to put out a game? Do you actually have to have any content in this game that we want? It's probably slightly better to be funded by an indie development fund than it is to go to a publisher like Square Enix and then have them make lots of demands and try and hit certain sales goals and things like that, get certain Metacritic ratings on your games. Arguably, the word fund and grant might be the exact same in a lot of scenarios, and so if it had, in my mind, said an indie development fund had given grants of a certain amount to these independent people, that would have made a little bit more sense. But that's not what I'm seeing as to what this does. It says Kowloon Knights supports indie developers around the world with funding while still ensuring developers retain ownership of the works. Ownership is not 100% being indie, though. That it's better than what publishers often want to own it. So that almost certainly Kowloon Knights wants some of the money back if the game sells. And they probably want 100% of all the gross, maybe net revenue of game sales until whatever their investment it was originally is covered, plus some profit, which that's not indie. Like, you're not, let me see if I can make a contrived metaphor here. You can't call yourself single just because you've married somebody who only wants a allowance once a month, or like you're still married at that point compared to like a common law ownership marriage type experience where everything is shared. It's still marriage. Indie, I don't know why I even need to make that metaphor. Wasn't even that good. To be truly indie, you have to actually truly be independent. It's right there in the name. And I'll say an independent company is still independent if they hire somebody to advertise for them and they're paying advertisers, certainly. But when somebody's funding your game and one assumes that same somebody is going to want some of the profits to pay back that funding, Can't use this. Interesting. I would have thought I could have used that. Also, this didn't activate. Not that it would have really helped that much. Moving on, Video Games Chronicles says GoldenEye software trademark has been renewed amidst remaster reports. Although this almost is a catch-22 because as soon as they renew the trademark, then the reports come back, or as soon as it's even close to time to renew the trademark, the reports and the come back that they're going to remaster GoldenEye. Suppose there is a slight change in the air as far as James Bond and MGM, since MGM just was like sold or acquired by, I think, Amazon, and MGM was the partner producer with the James Bond estate, the person who wrote James Bond, I forget his name. I want to say it's Arthur Conan Doyle, but I'm almost certain that's not the right name of the right author. Ian Fleming is, I believe, the name. Yeah. So, with MGM potentially changing hands, perhaps there's new people that could renegotiate something around the GoldenEye video game. Well, on the other hand, I wouldn't be surprised if people are just renewing the trademarks and nothing really is in the talks or being planned. With every year, GoldenEye is just going to look worse and worse, and the nostalgia around it is only so much. It needs a full-on remake as much as instead of a remaster. Like, if GoldenEye was really that good, it would have been fairly easy to make a clone of GoldenEye in the decade since it's come out, and have mods that just make the exact same levels and the exact same controlling, and maybe not license infringing images, but I could see mods even doing that. You could almost certainly recreate GoldenEye fairly easily in something like Counter-Strike Go, if you cared to, and yet nobody has cared to. It definitely feels like one of those games that people think they want, but they really don't want. Let's see, let's move on. Sorry, I'm getting quiet here. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe's new update has revealed all 12 DLC Cup names, which, okay. I don't think there's particularly too much that would be amazing there. What I do see here is you can see that some of these levels are being straight up labeled as this came from Mario World Tour, this came from 3DS version of Mario Kart, this came from a Nintendo 64 version, this came from a Wii version of Mario Kart, since there's been so many different versions of Mario Kart out there. There definitely is a problem with me potentially trying to play something like Mario Kart, though, since it is a game that really is best played with multiplayer people. Like, I could certainly get a game like Mario Kart if it was cheaper on sale and Um, and just like play through the single player circuits. But I don't know what I'd really be doing there. I'm just playing against AI in a kid's game. At least when you're playing something like Link's Awakening, there's a little bit more of a challenge and even some nostalgia, even if it is a game I actually didn't play as a kid. But yeah. I will almost certainly have to admit that once I'm done playing most of the games on my Nintendo Switch, I will almost certainly have to admit that most of the games are just not for me. Even though I play Lego games all the time on Steam, those games have never actually been for me as a target audience. Even as an adult fan of Lego, the Lego games have never really been for me. And I think Nintendo games in particular give off that message very highly with their tiny little Joy-Cons. On the other hand, though, if I was a parent, I don't see how many parents could have convinced kids that they didn't need a Switch when the Switch came out. And almost certainly would have been a smarter move to just buy a Switch as close to day one and just accept that that was going to be the console that your kids played on. It's not like Nintendo is going to bring out a Switch 2 anytime soon. It's been out, particularly when it first launched, 4 or 5 years of one console is a pretty good deal, even if the games are lackluster. They have a full list here on Video Games Chronicles as far as the cups. Although the racetracks actually in the other cups seem to be kind of hidden. Following microtransaction criticism, Gran Turismo 7's latest patch makes it harder to earn cars. Patch appears to target racers that players were using to farm in-game currency. So they just doubled down on trying to rip off people. And yeah, I guess unfortunately that is the way it goes. And the best we can do is hope the boycotts and slow sales of these types of games would push the players away from that. Okay. I'm gonna continue doing what I was planning on doing. We'll see what we can do. Alright. Well, that was a mistake. So he's got this synergy where every time a character dies, he'll get health up and be able to destroy one of my cards, one of my monsters. See, Video Games Chronicle says, watch for over 14 minutes of Hogwarts Legacy PS5 gameplay in today's state of play. That happened? Apparently so. Does seem like you're going to have a lot of gestures that you're doing with the wand, and I think that probably shows kind of the problem with the Harry Potter universe. converting it to a video game is that there's not a lot of punching or throwing, hacking, and slashing that's going to happen. I kind of have to question how 4 buttons would even be able to do that much as far as different actions. And I don't think it does. I think they kind of dance around and overly animate the characters to probably hide the fact that you're just pressing X, Y, A, B to do one of 4 different actions. I wouldn't be surprised if A is the roll forward action. Something I am seeing here that looks intriguing is it seems like there's an actual character that you're playing as, or actual characters. I think their little Hogwarts outfits look pretty terrible with the coats, but I think that's also a nostalgic play, so you probably can't get around that. But the faces look good instead of previous Harry Potter games where it's very generic looking characters that fell out of place. I just saw a commercial for the next Fantastic Beasts movie, which would be, I assume, the 3rd Fantastic Beasts series movie. And it's a little shocking that they're still going forward with that, but I guess it's probably the same in the movie case as it is in this video game case, is that they just have so much momentum around making Harry Potter, and they've invested so much into Harry Potter that I don't think there's a way you can stop making Harry Potter things, even if you wanted to. Definitely looks intriguing. And they're riding little griffins. A lot of these cutscenes look really interesting and really good that they're showing here at the end, but if we could go back to... So here's like the customizations as far as outfits, and so I think eventually you probably would be able to get that, and there seems to be almost a house building aspect, but maybe not. That may just be magical things appearing. No, that definitely feels like a house building aspect. This also feels very much like they're trying to make a open world MMO. Here you have chest opening animations, very basic things you'd expect. But I would say the combat is the thing that is going to be weird. Here you have some wand battles, but you see how it's just like spin, attack, spin, attack, spin, attack. This is what's going to particularly, I think, get boring and repetitive. As far as I understand the Harry Potter universe, it's not a case where you have to do a little dance to cast a spell. There is that sci-fi channel, The Magicians show, that's over now, where magic was originally written in such a way that they had to put their hands and their fingers in specific positions and do a little hand gesture, almost like a ninja doing shapes in an anime. But as far as I understood it in Harry Potter, you would just say something like Expello Patronus or something, some pseudo-Latin nonsense spell, and wave your wand, and that was it. Here it doesn't even seem like you would do that. And that would be very annoying if he was just saying uh, inflame, 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 and just over and over again shooting fireballs. Or fireball, fireball, fireball. Uh, but yeah, this is the gameplay loop I imagine you're going to do a lot of. So this is the part I would want to see them improve upon. Apparently Hogwarts Legacy is coming out in the 2022 holiday season. Seems like it was originally scheduled for everything in 2021. Yeah, it visually looks good, but I'm still not 100% sure if there is a if it is an MMO or if there is a way to play it as a single player experience. You have that extra problem certainly in that a game like this, you may want your kids to be to play it, but you may not want your kids to play online. And if there's no way to really experience it without being online, that's a whole second level of concern, and somewhat legitimate concern, that the kids, parents will have. And even if there is a single player, if it's so focused around multiplayer, there may not really be a story or an experience to have in single player that's anywhere as good. Imagine if you were to imagine if you were to find out that Skyrim was like 10 times better if you had played it online, how disappointed you would be. Or if you played GTA Online offline and then realized actually all the good content is online. Moving on, Netflix's live-action Resident Evil series is coming in July, and they've given you a very gory zombie dog face here. Actually would like to see some of the other animation if they had other animation, but all they've got is this dog. And you'd almost assume that they just are CGing the dog's face. I can't imagine that there's any other way you would make up a dog to look like that in live action, and also have a dog be trained to growl and snarl in specific ways. Yeah. Honestly, there's nothing about this that actually seems to be confirming that any of this is live action. Like, this might be a live action puppet. Like, but I wouldn't be surprised if the dog is 100% CG, and it'd be very weird to promote a live action series with CG, but it wouldn't be the first time something like this happened. Even if you were able to get monsters to look realistic, which is pretty easy to do, it's way harder to get humans to look realistic as zombies. And if that's not something of a concern, that is definitely a concern that should have been addressed as soon as possible. Special summon this. Go ahead and toss this. And toss one of these. Doesn't particularly matter which. I've overplayed here, almost certainly. Because now I have, like, no cards. He has 4 cards. So he would have to not be able to really do anything in the next 2 turns. Which, yeah, the odds of not being able to do anything in the next 2 turns are pretty low. Moving on, Video Games Chronicle says Nora the Conspiracy is a free-to-play 2v2 turn-based game with a unique twist. This looks like this is one of these games that has also been favorited, so this article theoretically would be at the top of their list always. But I don't really see anything like it being sponsored content, any kind of disclosure like that, but I wouldn't be surprised if secretly it is. You never really know with companies. Nope, here it is right at the bottom. This is a sponsored post. For more information, read our sponsored content policy. Way at the bottom. Yep. So I really shouldn't have any desire or to cover sponsored content. And I still definitely feel like it's a case that video game journalist sites should not take advertisement money from video game companies. It's just that simple. Like, they should be advertising things like Monster Energy or Doritos. Things that are not directly conflicting with what they report on. Let's see. I think you just play it safe here and just destroy everything for 2,000. Well, that's probably about as best as we could hope. Moving on, Video Games Chronicle says Supermassive has released its first trailer for the new teen horror game, The Quarry. If it's supposed to be a teen horror game, I would have to question some things here, because this guy doesn't look particularly like a teen, this guy doesn't look particularly like a tween, this woman doesn't look like a teen, this guy doesn't look like a teen, this guy's probably not a teen, this girl's maybe a teen. So unless all the teen are down here, which maybe that is the case, that they don't feel like they're emphasizing. I wouldn't be surprised if this girl and this girl are the same person. But yeah, that seems like a bad picture if that's what you're going for. Although in all fairness, you would say a teen horror movie is still a teen horror movie if there are a couple of adults in it. This feels like one of those games that is doing fast face scanning technology and is going to heavily lean on that to have it look and feel realistic. I'm seeing a lot of cutscenes here that make this feel more like the butterfly effect than a Friday the 13th game, which I was definitely leaning more towards thinking that this was going to just be a Friday the 13th game. But no. This feels like this is a linear story experience, maybe with branching paths, like the butterfly effect. Hopefully it comes to PC, because the butterfly effect game didn't. think that's actually the name of the game, is the Butterfly Effect. I could actually be wrong about the name. Can bring this in here, but I think we've lost. I can't spend 2,000. They're putting out credits here specifically for each of the face scanned actors. Which again, that definitely has a feeling of it being a linear story experience. It says it's coming out for, what did it say it was coming out for? It briefly put up a thing at the bottom here. PS5, PS4, Xbox Series, Xbox One, and PC is what it's coming out for. Sorry, I lost my train of thought there. It may very well become the case that we're going to start seeing horror movies in the horror genre being more profitable in video game format. Like, if you think about it, the teen horror movies and the teen sex comedies, which you can't really do the teen sex comedies so much anymore because of Me Too / sexism issues, and just inappropriateness of that genre often anyways. Since those genres had always been designed to get teenagers into a movie theater and get the next generation into the movie theater, it would make a lot of sense if those types of stories started getting told in a more modern medium like interactive video games instead. And so we may start to see things like that coming out in video game form a lot more. Elden Ring is oddly kind of in that same category, where George R.R. Martin in previous times would have probably tried to make a movie and put a movie out, but instead wrote for a video game, and that may become more acceptable and more standard. I definitely could see how the interactivity in horror stories too would improve the experience. That's not to say though that we'll ever stop seeing the occasional Friday the 13th or Nightmare on Elm Street type movies or Saw movies. I just think that it may become lesser and lesser, and eventually it may become a case that more genres are tried out as video games or become more common as video games. It would be somewhat hard for me to imagine something like a romance comedy coming to video game formats, but that is what visual novels are. So you would have to really scale things up. You'd have to have face modeling, and you'd have to have some interactivity to justify that, whereas a rom-com tends not to have that kind of action. On the other hand, horror movies, action movies, those would make sense. Drama movies somewhat would make sense if there's just a lot of talk and dialogue. That might make sense, maybe not. The more passive a movie is, the less likely it would be improved by being a video game. And there will always be some styles of storytelling and some that are going to be better off as linear movie experiences. But we could potentially get to a point where movies are just always by default streamed through devices like video game consoles, if not video game consoles, for a linear experience. The walking simulators even add something that is slightly unique for dramatic experiences that you don't get if there was a camera directing your eye in something like that. It's a slight difference between watching a walkthrough of a walking simulator like Gone Home compared to playing it yourself. And I don't know if people appreciate or even recognize good cinematography as far as framing the images and color balancing the shots and showing everything. There definitely are some master auteurs out there that were spending lots of time thinking about everything as far as like, why is that book on the bookshelf in the background? But for, I'd say, about 95% of all producers, and it's like maybe somebody thought about it, but it wasn't really the director, and it doesn't really matter why the book is in the background. It's not some subtle hint towards anything or anything like that. So, like, a well thought out art house film probably should have cinematography, but if you're watching just a movie where everything is flat on, you're getting square 16:9 shots always, and there's no interesting angles, and there's no set dressing or scene design that matters. There's no Dutch angles, there's no fast twists from one shot to another, there's no like transitions of interest. Yeah, you really have to have quite a lot of all of that also going on in a movie for it to start to for cinematography to actually matter. And for the most part, it doesn't. Even in like action movies actually have gotten pretty awful, because what happens is you have an action movie with a gunshot and they chop it up so you can't actually see anybody getting shot with the guns, so they can get a PG-13 rating instead of an R rating. And that is one of the benefits of video games, certainly, is not having to worry so much about the ratings. So yeah, you'll see this action scene and it will just be this flash, mix mash of images of, oh, I saw a gun go off, but I didn't see where the gun was pointing, or the gun was off screen when I heard a bang and I didn't see where it was pointing. And maybe somebody's holding their side, but I'm not sure if they got punched or shot there, and they're not bleeding. And then they fall down on the ground, and maybe the camera doesn't even show them on the ground. Like, hiding detail with cinematography to get a rating is the exact opposite of what they should be doing. Moving on, Quantic Dream claims its work on 3 new games is progressing serenely, which that's a odd phrase. Detroit Become Human has cleared 6.5 million sales. I have to say though, 6.5 million sales is pathetically low, because Detroit Become Human was released like 3 years ago at least. We've seen other games that were real successes sell 10 million very easily. And Quantic Dream's style of gameplay making, which are mostly cinematic with a few cutscenes, it's very much like a Telltale style game. But knowing that's the kind of games they make, it's not likely that the next 3 games are going to be much different. And the storytelling in the Quantic Dream games are, I think, a little weird, a little simplistic. I definitely feel like the main guy in charge of Quantic Dream has ideas. He has a narrative and a story he wants to tell, and then he gets other people to make video games around it. Whereas it's very possible that Quantic Dream games would have been better as movies. There definitely are cases in which that is the case. Here we have Hogwarts Legacy having a release window. I suppose it is worth mentioning that while this screenshot shows a female character, that 15 minutes of gameplay that they showed only showed male characters being played. Which doesn't make me particularly suspect that you can't play as a female character, and it does give more evidence that you likely can customize your character at the beginning of the game. But it does highlight potentially some sexism in trailer making or in footage making. One of the things that I found kind of shocking on the Nintendo Switch, which I will, I guess, in these live streams talk about my experience playing the Nintendo Switch. One of the things that is kind of shocking is that you don't have a system-wide like language option. It would be very easy to just at the beginning say, I want English as my language and English as my spoken language, and then even have like a secondary option that says if English is not available, I want to play in the default language or the Japanese language, because I could see there being some downloadable visual novels that don't have English as a spoken language but do have Japanese as a spoken language. And then it also should be very possible from a system level to say I don't want any spoken language ever and disable that. But no, that's not how the Switch works. Every time you launch a new game, it asks you what your language is, and then half of the games say you cannot change your language after you've set it, which seems insane. Like, there's really no reason for that other than just bad programming. But that is, yeah, a lot of little niggling details, a little coming apart at the seams elements in some of the games and demos I've looked at that just don't make sense. These are solved problems, and problems that have been solved for a fairly long time in the PlayStation and Microsoft fields. So all Nintendo really would have had to do is have an intern copy features from the other two, but they seem to just not care, which is almost certainly the case, that they don't care. Moving on, Gran Turismo 7 has largely been unplayable for half a day due to extended server maintenance. Update the game is now back online after 30 hours of downtime. That's pretty bad that you can't keep your game running and you're changing things to make it even harder to play as a free-to-player. Then we have first look. Here's every Mario Kart 8 Deluxe DLC track. Basically, we're getting redundant articles from Video Games Chronicles at this point. Apparently, Hogwarts Legacy is also coming to the Switch. Sounds like it definitely should. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe Data Mine. It's like Hogwarts Legacy, Gran Turismo, Hogwarts Legacy, Gran Turismo. It's three games being talked about over and over again. So feels like Video Games Chronicles decided they needed to put out a certain number of articles and didn't have that much to talk about. Okay. Destroy one card on the field. See how this works. Yeah, Gran Turismo been offline, and we go through the articles in reverse chronological order, basically. So any article that's later is actually later in time. A little surprised there that I got a victory, but I guess that was a connection failure victory, and it does seem like those are always possible. Dimension Jar. Flip, both players can remove from play 3 monsters from their opponent's graveyard. That's a new one to me. And then Blue-Eyed Silver Zombie. But you'd think the Blue-Eyed specifically meant something as a key phrase, and maybe there is a card that will work with Blue-Eyed cards, including Blue-Eyed Silver Zombie, but it may also be very much that Blue-Eyed is just something that would be unique to Japanese people who tend to have black eyes or brown pupils. Not so many blue-eyed Asians out there. Let's see. Apex Legends Mobile targets a full launch in summer of 2022, according to Video Games Chronicles. Demon's Tilt will be the next free game on the Epic Store next week, which looks like a pinball table game. And then Ubisoft has delayed Roller Champions release to late spring. I was very shocked in trying to play Rocket League, and I may have a better experience with it at some point when I spotlight it on my PC, but trying to play it on the Switch was very clunky and rough, and I was expecting, frankly, to have a lot more interesting time with it. And I would question, certainly, if I didn't have much fun with Rocket League, whether I would have that much fun with something like this. A lot of these are definitely games where your experience is going to heavily be improved if you have people playing with you that you know and you're having fun with your friends. Even like a generic real-world basketball game is way different if you're playing with friends versus a 3-on-3 pickup of 6 random strangers, which would be kind of crazy to even attempt something like that. I'm gonna wait a turn and then play this. Here we have another Gran Turismo article. Gran Turismo producer addresses microtransaction controversy as 30-hour server downtime ends. The producer says it's important that the car's values are linked with the real-world prices. No, it's not. I cannot see a reason. There's no reason for that to be the case. Like, you'd have to be an idiot to not know that some cars are way overpriced in the real world, and that there's no reason for that connection to exist in a virtual world. Unless you stupidly contractually negotiated something like that, which I assume is what's going on there. But it very well may also just be greedy. Like, you would have to be a billionaire, if not trillionaire, to want to own or even begin to think about owning every single model and make of a car that exists in the world. Whereas in a video game, it's fairly reasonable to want to unlock every single car, every make and model of a car. Actually, I didn't want to do that. Let's see if I can cancel this. Yep. In fact, for me, as a obsessive kind of collector of video games, of items in video games, I don't really see any scenario where I wouldn't want to get every single car unlocked in a racing game. See, as this goes, this shouldn't destroy this. If it does, I'm gonna be irritated. That being said, I still can't defeat that. Moving on, Ubisoft has revealed a new cloud computing tech built to power the game worlds of tomorrow. Ubisoft Scalar promises to create brand new types of games. Yeah, we'll have to see, though, really what it does. I'm still yawning and fairly sleepy. It's not been particularly easy to sleep while my back has been hurting me for the past few days. But even if my back was perfectly fine, my insomnia certainly would still be acting up, as it loves to do. And yeah. Looking at the scaler, I'm seeing a lot of fluff and a lot of advertisement of things they've already done. So maybe they're talking over this and talking about what scalar is supposed to be, because it doesn't really feel like it's much of anything. I don't see how a node-based system is a logically good way to create a world. Seems like this is just a weird abstract representation of how the world might be. But yeah. Not really seeing it. Like, honestly, it just feels like this is a chunk rendering system that like Minecraft's had for a long time. It's scalar. Yep. At the core of it, though, these nodes floating around don't seem to actually connect to any specific spot, and these other colored nodes seem to randomly affect things. Because you attached like this green node to all these orange nodes, so unless it was a case that all orange nodes for the most part just average out the color nodes, the orange nodes seem to not really represent anything. Maybe they represent a height and elevation of the ground, but it doesn't even feel like that's true. And then the white node here adds snow over here. The red node added a little bit of a volcano here. The green node covered the majority of the land with green. Blue node barely added any ocean. I think I've lost here. He's got a god card. I think the next step also would be to certainly think about whether game developers would like to use Ubisoft's technology in particular. Like if it's even being released as a technology for other developers to use. Like, you would almost certainly want to use something like Unity or Unreal, and if it was a plugin for Unity or Unreal, that would probably be a lot better, but you still may not want to do business with Ubisoft in such a way. You can see in this article, Scalar is not a new game engine, which arguably it probably is a new game engine. Scalar is an alternative and also an option for existing game engines to use to be cloud accelerated, both in terms of production but also in real-time experiences. I don't know if I've ever seen anything as far as cloud development that's particularly that helpful. It just doesn't feel like that's the way you're going to develop assets or parts of a game. It would feel to me like it would make a lot more sense to have an SSD in every programmer's and animator's computer working on like a low resolution version of the world, and then when you want that final render, if you're just trying to render out graphics or compile a much more complicated world with a lot more grass elements and things like that, maybe at that point you would hand it off to a plugin and do some cloud multiple computer rendering. But on a day-to-day aspect, you still would want everything downloaded and just faster to access and easier to access. I also would be fairly cautious at this point to invest into anything that is super online required. Internet outages do happen, and for some companies certainly they happen really terribly. But we may definitely see a lot more like worldwide near complete internet outages happening in the future. And you just don't want to be dependent on somebody else's service being shut down or an outage or something else like that. You never want to put downtime as far as your employees into the hands of other people. You want to reduce and if possible eliminate the risk of downtime. Moving on, Xbox Game Pass Ultimate members can watch the Halo TV show for free for 30 days via the month-long Paramount Plus trial. And I assume these other characters are going to have names, since this is John is the name of Master Chief John something. I think there's, on my rough understanding, having never really played any of the Halo games, there's also some weirdness here in that these suits and I think kind of the genetic engineering that was being done to people to make them Master Chiefs and put them in the Halo armor made them very tall. He's supposed to be like 6 foot tall, 6'5", something really, really tall. So it feels fairly weird that what looks like a communications officer with this antenna is a female, and yet she seems very short. But of course, real world actors, you would just put them in a suit. You wouldn't put them on like 5-6 inch platform heel boots to make them even taller. But there seems to be a lack of canon there. Although it may just be that he was genetically engineered and none of these other people are. So maybe we'll find out that these guys are barely like 5'11", 5'10", and then she's somewhere around 5'5", and then he's 6'2" or 6'3". But I imagine the height of the character is probably going to be the least of anything to for people to complain about. It's much more important, though, once again in cinematography, to have your characters be about the same height and look the same way, and that's always been the case. They've always had short actors stand on apple boxes or give them platform shoes. So here we are now at the Gematsu articles, and some of these are going to be redundant, I think. Curse to Golf adding Xbox Series and Xbox One versions. Clash Artifacts of Chaos launches in November. This is the first I've heard of this game. What is this supposed to be? You have this kind of monstrous looking character, but may just be an alien character. You know, every time I've seen like an alien character you play as in an alien world, it never really sells. It's too weird, too niche. I think it's just the sad fact that humans aren't that imaginative and they cannot relate to something that does not look 99% human. So this definitely seems weird. It might be more in line with the kind of weird I like, though. Like I definitely am not looking at this and going, there's no way I'd ever play this. If anything, there's definitely a way I would play this, but I would question how many other people would play it. The escape puzzle game Escape Academy has been announced for everything. This was a game that potentially could be a new Myst-like. In a funny way, if you were to make a Myst-like game and then you have this kind of soft-celled animation of all the environments, the visual novel elements here look animated slightly different. I don't know if a lot of people would give it the time of day. Like, this does feel a little too cartoony, whereas Myst was trying to go hyper realistic, and even The Witness itself may have been a better game if the visuals had been more hyper realistic. It may have sold better. It probably wouldn't have been a better game considering how important the visuals were in The Witness. But yeah, I would definitely go hyper realistic in any kind of open world puzzle game. Trek to Yomi has its combat trailer according to Gematsu. A turn-based RPG, Whale Fall, has been announced for major consoles and PC. Interesting to just call it major consoles, because that means you could internally consider the PlayStation or the Xbox not a major console, or the Switch not a major console, and you definitely leave that to your own interest or your own design. They probably said that because it's a Kickstarter game and they're expecting that it would be quite a while before the game actually gets made. The wrestling RPG WrestleQuest has been announced for everything. We already talked about that. Floppy Nights has added an Xbox One version and launches in Q2 of 2022. Seems to not have a specific date though. Dragon Quest X Offline has detailed advanced vocations, if you want to check out that article. Yep. This little chibi art style, I guess it does not really look that off from what the Dragon Ball characters look like. It's kind of easy to realize, to forget what the Dragon Ball characters look like in the manga or in Dragon Ball versus what the characters look like now in Dragon Ball Z. Because when you get to like Goku in an adult form being drawn the way he is drawn, that is kind of very far away from Goku as a child in Dragon Ball. And at this point, I don't know if there's really enough relevancy or reason why you would ever want to go back and watch Dragon Ball instead of just starting at Dragon Ball Z. But yeah. The weird pig-like creatures, for instance, a pig-like humanoid creature in Dragon Ball Z. Like, he was more close to the average animation style that you would expect to see in Dragon Ball. Or, Krillin is kind of more in line with that style. Yep. And so this Dragon Quest animation is also very much still somewhat in that style of short chibi characters and weirder looking characters in general, just being fairly creative with the varieties. And I guess that probably explains the popularity of Dragon Quest a little bit more too, if it's all in the Dragon Ball animated style and people are nostalgic for Dragon Ball. Moving on, Gamatsu says Eve Ghost Enemies has an opening movie. I would assume that this is a visual novel. You have a couple people smoking, which makes it feel like there's probably a real emphasis on smoking or obsession with smoking that the creator has, or the characters have. Skipping through the blurred out opening movie, I don't even know if the blur is actually working. Yeah, I think it is, but it's kind of hard to tell sometimes. Yeah, it looks like it's an action, maybe murder mystery visual novel. That would be where I would lean to assume it is. The Sega Genesis games have been added. We had already talked about that. NetEase Games Sakura Studio outlines 3 new titles in development for consoles. One is an action RPG, one's a battle game based on a popular IP, and one's a co-op action game. NetEase, I believe, is kind of more focused around the Chinese feudal style games. So it'd be interesting if they come out with something to the West and that would actually appeal to the West. The game Relator has a systems trailer, which is nothing. The Gematsu has a Echoes of Mana pre-registration now available. Which is a smartphone game, obviously. These might just all be new articles today from Gematsu. I thought there was some redundancy there, but I'm not really seeing any repeats yet. Maybe we'll see them later at the end. I still haven't gotten around to rewriting the code to try and fix the glitch with Gematsu. Although I am fairly certain that is a glitch. If it isn't, I have no idea what is causing the glitch. Let's see, Gematsu says Nights in the Nightmare remaster for Switch launches April 7th. What kind of game is this? The release date for the iOS and Android versions were not announced. I don't recognize a game called Nights in the Nightmare, though. A strategy shoot-'em-up RPG launched on the DS in September of 2008. Well, I guess that would explain why I don't recognize it. I did very little with the Nintendo DS and I didn't ever get a 3DS. I did get a DS, but pretty much lost interest in most of those games and didn't go very deep down that well. Let's see, Hatsune Miku Isho ni Jigsaw puzzle has been announced for Switch. Looks like nothing. I mean, Hatsune Miku fans might like it, but I don't even know if there are that many still around. G Darius HD, G Darius version 2 updates launch March 31st. Which, yeah, that doesn't look like much of anything. I think G Darius might be a shoot 'em up or it might be a music game. I should have looked at the article a little bit more. Relayer Physical Editions launches May 20th in the West. Relayer looks like it's a mech combat game. I really am going around in circles in my mind as far as some of these games because they come and they go, and then I forget them, and then they get mentioned again, and then it's usually 6 weeks to 6 months after the last time it's been mentioned that the game comes out, and that I might even actually consider playing it. My only hope is that at some subconscious level I am learning about some of these games. They have the Famitsu sales update here. Pokemon Legends Arceus selling 34,000 units overall since its launch on 1/28. It sold 2.15 million, and I expect that number to be fairly high overall. In 3 years, I imagine it will be much higher than 6 million, like Beyond Human. Elden Ring taking the second place, certainly as a PS4 version, selling only 30,000 compared to 34,000. Gran Turismo also taking some things. The Chocobo GP game, from what I hear, is pretty bad, but it seems like it sold particularly well. Although it might also be like a free-to-play game, so having 12,000 units sold may not really mean anything if it's 12,000 people that got the game for free and aren't putting any microtransaction income into it. It's kind of interesting that .hackgu last recode is here, and the 7th spot. I wouldn't expect it to have ever broken the 10th spot. Minecraft for the Nintendo Switch has sold 2 million copies. Maybe 2 million is a little bit better than I thought. Pokemon Shield and Sword, though, you see 4 million there. Mario Party is up to like 2 million. I guess 2 million is about as much as you can hope, which probably means there's about 8 to 10 million Switches out there in general. I still would have a real hard time justifying playing any of the Pokemon games. Let's Go Pikachu, Let's Go Eevee, about the only game that I think would make sense to me. I'm not sure I've ever even played through a single Pokemon game, so playing a remake of the first game series, first generation of games, would kind of make some sense, but kind of not. Like, at a certain point, if you've managed not to play Pokemon by this point, by 2022, you might be better off just avoiding it completely. Moving on, sorry, getting quiet there. Moss Book 2 launches March 31st for PlayStation VR and PlayStation 4. I have 12 minutes of gameplay. Moss is the game I don't believe ever came just to Steam. Yeah, I think it came to maybe Steam requiring VR at best. A bullet hell dungeon crawler called Wildcat Gun Machine launches May 4th for basically everything. Let's see. Need to bring that to the field, I guess. I should have thought of something else, but I guess that works somewhat well. Okay. Is this guy just not going to counter anything? Seems like that might be the case. He's adding a field spell. See, Humble Games is going to publish a life simulation game called Coral Island for PC. I think we may have talked about that. I kind of like this art style, but just in the fact that it is different. Where so often it's just the same over and over again. Although I don't think that particularly helps the fact that these farming life simulation games tend to be the exact same anyways. And this is just taking way too long. The Komatsu says Iron Oath launches in early access on April 19th. A game called Signalis adds an Xbox One version and launches this fall. What is Signalis? Can't really tell. Looks like it is maybe a top-down twin-stick shooter that's really zoomed in. They're calling it a survival horror game, and I guess that might be the right bidding. Let's see, let's start going through some of the games on Steam. Here we have one called Buggos, which we can say no to. A little expensive at $12.75 or $12.74. Black Geyser Couriers of Darkness looks like a Diablo clone game that's mostly positive. It is on the follow list, so it must have been released on early access before. Let's see, party-based fantasy game. So is that multiplayer? No, it says it's single player only. It's mostly positive. And so by my normal metrics, I would say yes to this. But I almost want to say no to it, because I just don't think there's that many of these types of Diablo games that I would really want to play. And some of that is definitely colored from my perspective of what Activision Blizzard's acquisition by Microsoft may look like in the future, because the truth is, if they can get Diablo on Steam, then I would play Diablo on Steam. It would just be that simple. And then I would cover Diablo, Diablo 2, and probably not spend a lot of effort or energy to cover Diablo 3 or Diablo 4. I probably could rush through Diablo 3 and then try and play Diablo 4 whenever it comes out. But yeah, Black Geyser here looks like a fine game. It's just, I think at this point, easier to remove that from the follow list than to consider playing multiple games like that. I already have the Torchlight series that I've kind of covered. I've covered Torchlight 1 at least. I think I own Torchlight 2 and want to actually play that. This RTX Sweeper is a Minesweeper with ray tracing, which is kind of a ridiculous concept. Although in all fairness, if you were going to make a demo or an experiment using ray tracing and you were going to give it away for free, putting ray tracing on something kind of silly like Minesweeper would be easier for the programmer. It's just not better for the product in any way. If anything, it's an insult to what ray tracing is likely capable of doing. Next we have a game on Steam here called Snow Scout. I should also say I think, email Gabe Newell at Valve with my suggestion. I have gotten no response back. I probably won't ever get a response back. I didn't just directly email him, and though there was, when I googled his email address just to make sure I knew it accurately, and I could have definitely spent more time to find a better person to talk to than just the boss or the figurehead of Valve. But yeah, when I looked it up, they had a submission form with a CAPTCHA and all of that, so yeah. I mean, what can you really do though? Like, you throw out an idea into the universe, you hope they don't fall down on the category of, oh, now we can't ever do this because you'll sue us because we stole your idea. Like movie pitches. Like, if you ever want to see a movie made, just stay silent about it and hope somebody else thinks of it, because if you try to make a movie pitch, to an unsolicited movie pitch to a production company, Best case scenario, they steal your idea and then you get screwed over because of that. Worst case scenario, you stop something from getting produced. But my idea, just to reiterate, was it would be cool if they started to make creators pages like IMDb on Steam for voice actors, programmers, directors, QA people, even just have when people submit the games, submit names of each of the credits people, and then make a creators page, much like a publisher's page, that then gives them points of connections and relevancy between specific games. If you like one video game voice actor, all of a sudden with that information they'd be able to recommend other games in which that video game voice actor has worked, which that's kind of hard to do, because if you like the voice of a character, you're still going to have to know who that character is, who the name of that voice actor is, and then you would have to search in Wikipedia and hope that they have a full bibliography of that voice actor to find what other games they're in. Whereas if it's integrated into the back end of Steam would just be able to know that and point it out completely. On top of which, if it has nice API interfaces like IMDb kinda has, then this could be the de facto place where all of a sudden people who never go to Steam to buy games are going to Steam to see the credits and see the creators' pages, and it also is a good PR move, because then you're highlighting creators and making a much bigger deal about it, like actors and actresses get highlighted in movies. But yeah, I could even see at some point, if they were nice enough, where an API would allow game scrapers to specifically label and make data files around games. Now, inevitably, creators' pages would want to list every game somebody's in, regardless of whether that game is actually on Steam or not. So you would have like a system in which either you start to have listings for games that have never been on Steam and are unlikely to ever be on Steam, or you have a special section above that that says these are the games on Steam from this that this creator participated in or helped make. Anyways, that was the general idea. I kept the email fairly brief while trying to fully explain it and send it, and I will report back only if there is actually a response, which there very possibly isn't. This game, Snow Scout, though, is a VR game that doesn't really feel like there's much going on here, so I'd have to say no to that. Here we have a game called Outlier, which seems like might be a next evolution in a running parkour game in VR, because people are actually shooting at you, which I think that probably deserves a follow then. Running and gunning is different than just running, certainly, in VR is just makes everything more difficult to do well, or even somewhat well. Probably wouldn't be a mistake to expect the parkour running games that are pretty low effort to start putting in random things, random turrets that would start shooting at you and give you more of a challenge. Let's see, next we have a game called Dark Haunting, which is obviously just a dark screenshot horror game. I can't even see it well enough to know if it's an asset flip game also, so that's going to be no. Here we have a game called Metro Poke 3, which looks like nothing, so that's going to be no. Next we have Instant Artist Puzzle Mashup, which is just a puzzle game, so that's going to be no. I really have just drawn every spell card in this deck. Couldn't really have drawn the worst hand if you tried. Here we have a game called Donut Arena, which looks like it's an arena game with a lot of fat people. I wouldn't call them sumo wrestlers per se, though. If anything, this really just feels like this is the gag, is the characters are fat and then fighting in an arena. I just don't think there's a lot here. I will say, of all the movements and counter movements, the fat people hate movement versus the fat acceptance movements are probably the ones that I have swung between the most. Because in my opinion, and I can only say my opinion here, you would want to not hate people for being fat. People can be fat for all different reasons. People can have all kinds of other problems, and overweight could be the least of them. It's incredibly difficult for some people to lose weight. And sympathy is always at a small amount in a lot of people. But there's just no real reason to hate fat people in my book. On the other hand, I definitely can't agree with the fat acceptance movement and the extremes on that side, in particular where you're fat phobic if you even tell somebody, hey, you would be healthier or better if you lost some weight, or I really do care about you, let's try and lose some weight. That's definitely not something I can agree with either. In general, the two movements are also very funny in that you just leave people alone, don't care. Like it might make sense if you're related to the person, if you're dating the person, for you to care about their actual health, and health should be emphasized definitely way more than just weight, because you can potentially be a little bit overweight and still way healthy compared to somebody being, and you can also potentially be very underweight and very unhealthy. So health is really the emphasis you would want, both physical and mental health. There's no point in losing weight if you're going to be suicidally depressed in the effort. A lot of side effects of drugs, medications often are weight gain. Psychotics and mental pills or physical disease pills. But yeah, you can just leave people alone and just not worry about it. It's hardly the case that there are so many fat people that they are on a day-to-day basis making any impact on your life. And almost certainly a lot of this fat people hate movement comes from, like, just, I hate to say Asian countries in general, but it is pretty common and acceptable in Asian countries to hate fat people, because they're just more outspoken about it, and they're not particularly, they never grew up having to hold their tongue or be kind. And Chinese people, for instance, or Japanese people, like very, very few overweight people in their societies anyways, and it's just a desire to keep everybody looking the same and exactly the same. I could almost understand the fat people hate movement a little bit more if it was a hate for rich people. Like here everybody else is impoverished and starving to death, and here we have this, and here's this overweight person. But even that, I think, falls apart fairly quickly because, like, it's just not consistent that that is the case. Alright. And yeah, I think that's about as much as I want to say on that. It may even very well say something about me that I can't be more neutral on other movements and other hate movements and counter movements. But in part, I think that's because most other movements are also talking about something that is typically more important at the point where sides actually do need to be considered and joined. Moving on, we have Pretty Girls 4 Kings Solitaire from Zoo Corporation, which they're known for taking basically the same anime girls and putting them in card games, but not really showing a lot of nudity, just a little bit of skin, a little bit of cleavage, and that's it. What this game does remind me, I don't see any reason why you would want to play this Solitaire particularly, though it's just a variant of Klondike, or I guess it's more of a variant of Free Cell, maybe. This does remind me, though, it feels like last week we didn't see that many adult games. We maybe saw one, and this weekend doesn't feel like we're gonna see that many adult games. So there might be something weird happening as far as adult games on Steam. Maybe, maybe not. Could just be in general there's a slowdown in games overall. And we're in the March, and you would have thought we would have started to see a bit of a speed up of games, AAA games and small independent games in general coming out, but it's just not really the case. Let's see. Next we have Chinatown Detective Agency launching April 7th, according to Komatsu, which I would assume this is some kind of visual novel, but it kind of looks more like a strategy game. Point and click adventure. Interesting. Really don't have time to watch trailers, but yeah. There probably is some room for more detective style stories in point and click games. Like, sure, you could call something like Broken Sword a bit of a mystery game where you act kind of as a detective, but Broken Sword definitely didn't start off with there being a detective actually investigating something. The Perot game I played relatively recently would have been a detective game, but that Perot game also then has to fall under a very different feeling style of experience because it's Hercule Poirot. Activate this. Humble Games, which I assume is still a sibling company to Humble Bundle, is going to publish a Metroidvania game called Ghost Song for PC. on Steam. They'll launch in 2022. Well, between something like this and something like Tunic, we might very well be hitting a point where there's enough competitors or clones of Nintendo games that Nintendo stops being a company worth even mentioning. If we manage to start to see like Tunic out Zeldaing Zelda and some Metroidvania game out Metroiding Metroid or out Castlevania and Castlevania, we might just be at a point where it makes more sense to move to the next generation of clones. Like at some point, and this might be a rough comparison, when Burger King came about, some percentage of people who were probably going to McDonald's now switched over to Burger King. And for the most part, probably didn't turn back and go back to McDonald's. Let's see, what's more that we want? I guess this one. Just go and destroy a card. See if this works. This lets me attack. Then I should just activate this now. And then special summon this. Sacrificing what was in my hand. In attack position. Since that was basically a quick play card, he was able to attack. So we have a normal card, which I guess we're building up our inventory as far as normal cards if we try to make our own deck. It might be somewhat of a struggle to just find a normal deck that can even slightly win and try and play that and get the rewards for doing the festival. And because you're not getting a win streak, it doesn't seem like it matters. You really have to get a 3-win win streak to go up rank. Moving on, Humble Games is going to publish a rhythm RPG called Infinite Guitars. The RPG here shouldn't really be capitalized, or it should just use quotation marks. Far too often companies don't use quotation marks, and I don't think I'm the one who's wrong here. I'm not, like, quotation marks exist for a reason, and not just for quotes. Maybe there's a different style sheet that they're following, but if they don't want to use quotation marks, they could also italicize or underline the name. They need to do something here so you actually know the exact name, but maybe they don't care because they are just hoping that you read more of the article. And I guess maybe if I didn't have the ad blocker on, maybe scrolling down and reading more of the articles would have caused more ads to show as you scroll down. But in general, you should be able to get accurate information, if not all the information from the headline, instead of questionable information. Just end the turn there. As for Infinite Guitars itself as a game, yeah, there might be something here. It's probably going to be too much of a rhythm game for me, though. And I could see even somebody who likes rhythm games potentially being uninterested in the RPG elements, because that would take up some extra time. And I could see RPG fans not being interested in the rhythm elements. It may be a bad marriage of two gameplay mechanics. Is he destroying spells or is he destroying attack cards? He's destroying spells. So I did the right thing there. Humble Games is going to publish Stray Gods, a role-playing musical for PC. Seems like they definitely have an emphasis around the idea of RPG or role-playing musical games. Although this one does look different in the sense that this is seemingly an actual musical. So you have like these dialogue choices, and I wonder if that means that each of these dialogue choices would be sung out loud, or if it is going to be more of a case of you get some dialogue choices and then there are cutscenes of musical elements. I only know of maybe 2 or 3 games that tried to be musicals, video games that tried to be musicals, and like kind of like a rock opera type focus more than anything else, I would say. Yeah. Opera in general, I think, means everything is sung. Musical means not everything has to be sung, if I'm recalling correctly. So I would assume Stray Gods has musical cutscenes, and the actual pick your dialogue options are just spoken. The game Monaco 2 has been announced for PC, according to Gametsu, which doesn't look like much of a game, really. Like the only parts that even look slightly interesting is this screenshot, and maybe this screenshot, and then the rest of this looks pretty awful. Like, they're calling it a PC stealth game. Can't kill that guy, so I've lost. A 2D action platformer, Moonscars, has been announced for PC, which looks kind of interesting, like a Castlevania style clone. And that is, I suppose, the bare minimum that so many games fail to even do. That is that they'll make an announcement and the game will just not be that intriguing. Jacques Jian will be localized in English and traditional Chinese. This was launched a year ago in Japan. I feel like I'm thinking of some other game. It's a young maiden otome visual novel. See, and that was just a micro stuttering that just happened again. What causes this micro stuttering? Like, I haven't even replaced the RAM in my computer, but that's the indication that something is wrong with my computer. I've switched out the CPU. No, I've switched out the power supply. I've switched out switched out everything that I could. I switched out the bad RAM. Everything is just suspect. It's really sucks. Like, I don't know what's broken, but I think something's broken. And I may crash here at any point also. Let's just go on and continue here, but that micro stuttering, that audio stuttering there. Well, it's audio. It's always been audio. So it's either the RAM or the CPU. I think it might be the CPU, I guess, at that point. Yeah. Because the audio wouldn't be, but the audio might be the GPU too, because it's going through DisplayPort and HDMI. And it's always been that. It might be the video card. I should take out my video card and put in the other video card and see if something there would change it. Of course, that is potentially putting a good video card in a suspect motherboard or CPU system. Yeah, and part of the problem with like diagnosing such a weird problem is that you basically need two of the exact same computers, motherboards, and things like that, and that's never been the case. I can switch out a video card to an older system, certainly, but I can't put a AMD CPU into an Intel motherboard, which was my last computer. I don't think I can put the RAM. I could see if I could go grab the RAM out of my old PC and see if it would work. But this new RAM should not be breaking that quickly. Oh, that's so irritating. Anyways, we were talking about the video game news. I must be thinking of a different game that's not called Jack GN. Clearly this one, this game doesn't even have any screenshots or anything. It just says it's an otome visual novel. The Quarry, we already talked about that being announced. Godfall Exalted update launches April 7th. Hogwarts Legacy adds a Switch version, launches this holiday. New details, gameplays, and screenshots. We had already pretty much covered that. Street Fighter V Champion Edition update to add balance adjustments, cell shading, pixel graphics, and filters, and more on March 29th. Which really feels like a fighting game shouldn't have to put updates for those kinds of visual aspects. That should have been day one launch content. Now, typically what has happened when I've heard the micro stuttering is it's happened 2 or 3 times, and then all of a sudden the computer is just turned off and short-circuited. Let's see. Moving on. A Mario Kart Deluxe Booster Course Pass Wave 1 trailer. We had already talked about. We don't have to talk about it again. DNF Duel has a Ghostblade trailer for another cool character. I'm not sure if DNF Duel, though, has become particularly popular since its announcement. It seems to be occasionally announcing something, but I'm not sensing a lot of hype around it. Strangers in Paradise Final Fantasy Origin opening movie is available on Komatsu if you want to check it out. Arknight's Infield has been announced for PC, iOS, and Android. It's a new frontier in the Arknights series. Which Arknights is the Cat Girls mobile game that's... I think I played it and wasn't particularly enthralled with it. It's a gacha game and it spends a lot of money advertising itself. Or did for a brief time to get people's attention. Seems like they've gotten as many people playing Arknights as they think they can, and now they're moving on to a new game. Or a spin-off game. Nine Souls crowdfunding campaign has been launched. It's planned for the PS4, Switch, and PC. This looks like a game. It's kind of funny, we're starting to see crowdfunding coming back as a thing. Yeah. Crowdfunding as a thing seems like that people don't have access to income and everybody's broke everywhere. That would make a lot of sense. So I have like one hope to bring this to the field and destroy everything on the field. And that's my only real hope. The Full Metal Alchemist smartphone game has a second trailer. Looks like it's going to be mostly a fighting game. Yeah, that would be about what you would expect. For a anime series like Full Metal Alchemist, it's kind of shocking how much of it is really just people fighting. All the intriguing concepts and ideas that were proposed are used for a very basic, generic use of fighting people. Let's see, a game called Anonymous Code launches July 28th in Japan, and they have their 5th trailer. Let's see, trailer's not really showing me too much there. Apparently it's a sci-fi visual novel. Triangle Strategy shipments of digital sales have hit nearly 800,000. Yeah, my scale may be off. 2 million may be a really large amount of sales. It definitely feels like it's somewhere around 300,000 is a good amount of sales. Anything above that seems to be a great number of sales. We've lost, so we should just end. Genshin Impact version 2.6 update Zephyr on the Violent Garden launches March 30th. Vampire the Masquerade Swan Song gameplay reveal trailer is available to look at. And then Tunchi for the PS4 launches March 25th. It's currently already available for Xbox One, Switch, and PC. So interesting that the PS4 got delayed there. I probably should just stop playing at this point on Yu-Gi-Oh! Because I suspect I've done most of everything. Did I really spectate live? I don't think I did. And yet the game seems to think I did. If I found out there was a way to get the spectate live achievements without actually spectating live, that would be wonderful. If it was spectate live or play a ranked game, as a reward every day. I would definitely like that better. But yeah, this, with the exception of this playing solo mode, everything else is done, so now would be a good time. I have no idea how we ended up exactly at 10,000 gems, though. That there's really no reason it should be that round of a number. But yeah, we should rush through games in case this does crash. This one's a Chinese only game, so obviously I can say no to that very easily. Same is true for this RPG Maker game, which is Chinese only. Nope, Brawl. Doesn't look like anything of interest. So, nope to that. Toasted, I think, is probably a player versus player game, like a Mario Party mini game collection. So I'm gonna say no to that. Cosmo Player Z. There might be something to this, but I suspect not. But I'll give it a follow anyways. We're barely putting anything on the follow list today. 764, English and Japanese. Quest for Cathy Kingdom Mahjong. Mahjong Solitaire. Kind of low polished game. No to that. It's interesting it supported English and Portuguese Brazil. Here we have another Chinese game. Let's see. Here we have something called the Vortex, which is supposed to be a metaverse connected social environment. Valve and Gabe Newell has said nothing about NFTs. There will be no NFTs, at least for now, on Steam. But he hasn't said the same for metaverse as a buzzword. I think it's very important to potentially start banning it, the phrase metaverse too. But maybe not that important, because I think most people hate the idea of just hearing the word metaverse regardless of what it is, or whatever they're actually selling as the metaverse, as it is just this nebulous concept. This game is just a hidden object game, it looks like. It may not actually even be a hidden object game, just a small adventure game. Yeah, mostly it looks like it's a resource management game. Well, regardless, I'm still not interested. From Lex to Rex, looks like an old school point and click adventure game. So there might be something for that. I'm a sucker for those. And then we have lo-fi games, which thank goodness that didn't become too much of a trend of lo-fi games, or things being labeled lo-fi as video games. It's a Korean only game, so obviously that's a no. Here we have what looks like a visual VR experience. A little too much desert though, I think, for $8.99. Yeah, you'd really want to see like some kind of grand creation, some pyramid or something, if you were gonna fly around in the desert in VR. Next we have Floor is Water, which looks like nothing. Next we have a game called Iron Age, which looks like nothing. Next we have a game called Sprouts Lands, which looks like nothing. Next we have Melly Deer, which looks like it might be some kind of music puzzle game, but I don't know if there's really a puzzle here worth playing. Single screen kind of Unity game, a little too simplistic. 79 cents, English only. I think we can say no to that. Cactus Simulator, which is apparently some meme game. It's tagged with memes. So I'm gonna say no to that. We're seeing some Portuguese Brazil games, and those tend to be kind of bad or kind of trolly. Here we have one that's looks like it's in Spanish as the title. Array Unicorn. Let's see. English and Spanish. Says it's a board game. I don't think there's something here though that interests me. Big Screen Games Pack 1. Looks like it's a collection of party games. But I would definitely suggest like the Jackbox Party Pack over that, and $24.99 is asking quite a lot. Dungeon Raider. Looks like nothing there. Tumblebugs looks like a Zumba clone. There. The Finnish War looks like garbage. Click and Slay is a clicker. And oddly more visually polished than half the games we've looked at today. $7.99 for a clicker, still maybe a little too expensive, and generally I don't want to play a clicker game. Here we have a full motion video game, Who Pressed Mute on Uncle Marcus. Which is an interesting concept of let's investigate something that maybe not that significant. Next we have a game called Cavity Busters, which there might be an idea for a Binding of Isaac roguelike game around cavities. I don't think the visuals here quite work with this. If anything, it just feels like this is a Binding of Isaac clone in general. $11.99. If you're going to make a Binding of Isaac clone, you're going to have to work really hard to make it as good as or better than Binding of Isaac. Pixel Pirate. I kind of like the art style, but then the actual level design looks very boring and just looks like a platformer. I still would definitely think that in the top 10 games ever made, Binding of Isaac, as far as its fan base and how it plays, is in that top 10. There was definitely a lot more that are more influential, certainly, but as far as actual games you actually want to play, if you're willing to play Binding of Isaac, it might be number one. This Biggest Stream hover racing game, on the other hand, is not anything of interest. Integrates with Twitch, which means nothing to me. Here we have 9-9 new episode as far as a Moe visual novel dating sim game, but no indication of adult content, and even at that there's not enough of these. There should have been at least 2 or 3 of these types of games. I'll put it on the follow list just to see, because this might be a long-running series I was considering. But yeah, there definitely should have been 2 or 3 of those released today, and we're not seeing it. Maybe over the weekend we'll see some more visual novels, Moe art style games, but maybe not. And then if we don't see any this weekend and we don't see anything next weekend, that's a problem. Here we have a game called I Am Gangster, which looks like garbage. $3.59, English only, allegedly full audio. Here we have Royal Frontier, which just looks like an RPG game. Visually polished, fine, just kind of looks grindy as to what you would actually be doing. It'd be hard for a game that looks like this though to really stand out and make me want to go through a lot of fights on this same screen over and over again. That's the kind of stuff I'm trying to avoid in RPGs. The final hour is just a horror dark screenshot game, so we can say no to that. We have about 5 more new games. Dinosaurs: A Prehistoric Adventure. You kind of have to put it on the fall list. It would be a little arbitrary to say no to this anyways, but any dinosaur game that even has a chance of being good, I want to keep an eye out for until we can find at least a couple that are good. Frisk Bros here seems a couch co-op ultimate frisbee game according to the description, so almost like an Arkanoid game in some aspects, but it's also couch co-op, so playing in single player is not the emphasis. And visually, the level design, the tile set design is pretty bad. Here we have Serbia: The World Before, which is another game in the Serbia series, which at some point I'll get around to playing that, I would hope. That's put that on the fall list. Neon Sundown here is one of these Neon Asteroids clones, which looks like most of the other Asteroids clones. $3.99, English, allegedly full audio. Here we have a game called Soul Flow, which looks like nothing. That might be something. So I'm gonna be generous and put it on the fall list. English and Turkish. And then we have a game called Sad Ghouls, which looks like it's just an asset flip first person shooter, so no to that. And that will bring us to the GameDeveloper.com articles. Parappa the Rapper and Ocarina of Time are among the 2022 World Video Game Hall of Fame nominees. These Hall of Fame nominees are weird for sure, in the sense that there's none of it really makes that much sense as far as what wins and what's getting nominated. You should probably be nominating and just awarding a victory for each decade or each year, even, because there's definitely more historical relevance than you would think as far as the story of Miss Pac-Man than there is for something like Assassin's Creed. And you don't really even get to something like Zelda or Dance Dance Revolution until you know what Miss Pac-Man is. But the two games visually just don't compare. It'd be very hard to say Miss Pac-Man is better than Zelda or Assassin's Creed. And then like Minesweeper's somewhat important, but not really that important. Worlds with Friends, not really that important. So you're just all over the place as far as these comparisons. All of these potentially should be not put into the Hall of Fame. Yeah, you could potentially say Dance Dance Revolution and Ocarina of Time should be competing against each other for the 1998 first spot, but probably both games still should be highlighted. But Ocarina of Time compared to Assassin's Creed, compared to Minesweeper, compared to Rogue, it's just ridiculous. They really need to rethink how they do that. Let's see. There's an analysis article here from GameDeveloper.com. VR content market on track to generate $3.1 billion in 2022. The Itch charity bundle for Ukraine concludes after raising $6.3 million, which almost certainly there were better charities out there that raised a lot more. And $6.3 million is a lot of money, but it's not a lot of money for nation rebuilding. That's where you need the financing of an entire nation or group of nations together. GameStop has confirmed the NFT marketplace will launch in 2022, reports a revenue uptick. Triple Dot Studio acquires a mobile entertainment company called Live Play Mobile. If I can read it right. And then we already talked about Triangle Strategy selling over 800,000 copies. And then Ori developer Moon Studios has been branded a oppressive workplace by the current and former staff. The founders Thomas Mahler and Gennady Karoli have been accused of enabling casual racism, sexism, and bullying. We'll see where that story goes, I guess. Like, I don't know. Like, Ori as a game does not really feel like it would include any of that kind of content, but there's no reason to assume that what happens behind closed doors it would bleed into the final product. That you would like to live in a world where you could almost certainly believe these accusations and that nobody would lie, exaggerate, or be coming from just an insane perspective that's not realistic. But unfortunately, people do lie, and people are super SJW woke, and if they've been let go from the company or felt that they've been mistreated by a company, they will make all kinds of claims. Inherently, a workplace is probably not a good environment for anybody, and not a good environment for people, good way for people to interact and deal with each other. But I'm not sure there is a perfect way for people to interact and deal with each other. But yeah, this is also coming from GameDeveloper.com that loves to make these accusations and report on these accusations. They don't make them, they report on them over and over again. The exact next article is Phonominsa co-founder Robin Hunchi is accused of workplace emotional abuse, which at a certain level I think a lot of people actually do emotional abuse, depending on how extreme the emotional abuse is I guess the question. Former employees have spoken up about Phonominsa co-founder Robin Hunchi's behavior in the workplace, accusing her of emotionally abusing employees. But again, we'll just have to see if these stories come out. It almost feels like this all came potentially from one video, one drop, one article somewhere, and that's why we're getting multiple things. Well, here we have a game that's on the fall list. Let's do some fall list cleanup that I probably shouldn't give any more time to, but I will. Here we have a power slide game that I think we need to get rid of, but I'll give more time. Here Power and Revolution 2021 edition can leave. We can see that is mix reviewed from the fall list. Potion Pause can leave, which is a shame because I wouldn't mind playing as a cat. Potion Crafting Alchemist Simulator, on the other hand, can be elevated as soon as it comes out of early access to the wish list. Postal 4, I think, was pretty rough when it first came out, but I guess at this point it's now working. That being said, it is also still stuck in early access and has been in early access since October 14th, 2019. So it kind of feels like they either don't have a story or a wrap-up of what content they could say they're done with. Here's a game that I would like to put on the wish list, but I would have to make a special exception, and it is also early access from 2020. I'm going to leave this on the fall list just to remind me that, yeah, a model statuette style game, token game, might be interesting as a concept. Possession 1881 is a puzzle mystery game that doesn't have enough reviews to be relevant. Visually it looks acceptable, barely, but unless there was some other possession games and this was part of a series, which I don't think it is, this needs to leave the file list just because it's irrelevant. This is the only game from this developer. Positronics is mixed, so it can leave the fall list. If anything, this really goes to show how the system works. Even though it takes a lot of effort and time to look through every single game that comes out and then put the games that have any chance of being good on the fall list. Sorry, lost my train of thought there. Yeah, putting anything that has any chance of being good on the fall list, then waiting 6 weeks to 6 months at least to decide if something actually is relevant by having 30 reviews and that it's mostly positive, or it's at least in the positive range as far as those reviews. This game, Portal Stories Mel, I covered, so I don't need it on the follow list anymore. I totally covered this game as a community-made modification for Portal 2 that I don't think actually requires you to own Portal 2. That is kind of an interesting fan story of what happens in Aperture Science. Portal Reloaded, on the other hand, is the one I haven't played that has more of a time travel mechanic. Technically, I guess all the Portal games have you moving forward in time, far into the future. But this one actually, I think, has you moving backwards in time. I haven't actually programmed anything in the fall list cleanup. Come to think of it, once we get down to Z's, once I'm at the very end of the fall list, I haven't programmed anything to make it go back to the beginning. It's not really that big of a deal, I think, but I will just have to manually reset things once we get to the very end. And I'm going to quickly try to scroll down my Twitter feed just to make sure there isn't any big new news. Xplay is tweeting now, replacing what Attack of the G4 was tweeting. Even though I muted G4, they shift over to the Twitter. It also feels like G4 really didn't make good announcements about separating the channels into different YouTube channels. Jesse Cox is a somewhat successful YouTuber. Had to make a whole video going like, I don't understand what's going on with G4, and I think that is probably the case for a lot of people. It's not just the Frostcoon like rant that's the problem. It's also lacking any kind of consistent production, even from their early access pre-launch. They were all in like one beach house streaming together and doing something very different, and now G4 and XPlay are trying to go back to being much more like what they were originally, which is really what they should have just done in the first place. But even that is not really likely to succeed. I don't think there is a way to make G4 succeed. Like, XPlay can kind of exist, but it kind of needs to be a different type of thing. It needs to have a lot of polish and outshine any other video game critic out there. Whereas Attack of the Show, which heavily relied on talking about news, which there's no funny news to talk about at the moment, and internet memes and videos, that kind of stuff probably wouldn't work. And I think you definitely would have had to figure out some other new shows and launch new shows. And that probably is the one thing that they are failing at more than anything, is just making new content to try and bring in a bigger audience. And because G4 always needed that bigger audience, it was in part destroyed as a cable channel because it didn't have a big enough audience or a growing audience. Anyways, that's gonna be it for this recording. I guess I need to work on my computer some more because of the micro stuttering, and see if I can find something that is causing it. Otherwise, as always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want to friend or follow me on any social media sites, there's a whole bunch of links down below. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.